Well, we've come to the end of the first week of July, a week that is, for some, the most intimidating week of the year. For anyone working in healthcare, and in particular at a teaching hospital, the first week of July is when young doctors start out on the medical wards. Fresh out of medical school, they begin working as interns, newly minted doctors who, for the first time, are directly responsible for the care of patients. I was an intern here in the city back in 2012, and I remember trying to manage my patients' histories and medications and balancing a pager and charts and rounding and overnight call. It was an exciting but also an overwhelming time as the stakes and the emotions were quite high. But as I went through internship and observed others do the same, a couple patterns stood out to me. The first was that many of us young doctors wanted to appear strong in the face of this pressure we felt. We were just out of school and we wanted to show our stuff. We wanted to show that we were enthusiastic and intelligent and ready for anything. And then there was this other pattern. Faced with new challenges, many of us also realized that this was a unique time to learn and to grow. A time to grow intellectually by asking questions of our supervisors when we didn't know the correct diagnosis or treatment. A time to grow emotionally when faced with the suffering of patients and families, allowing ourselves to feel something of the weight of their circumstances, to show compassion and to grieve with them when appropriate. This second pattern required that we let our defenses down, lower our defenses a bit, a position some people might call more weak. So two very real patterns during this first week of July, wanting to show strength and also this pull to let ourselves be weak. If I did it over again, and I am not looking to do it over again, but if I did, I think I would do well to have a copy of our second reading from St. Paul stuffed into the pocket of my scrubs. St. Paul, we hear today, has a lot that's worth listening to about what it means to be strong and to be weak. St. Paul, to be clear, this was a confident man. He goes from being a passionate persecutor of Christians to an even more passionate preacher for Christ. And he has no problem telling people that he has seen and heard from Jesus Christ himself. And thank goodness, because it is Paul that we must credit for substantial growth in the early church. But even Paul has this sense that despite all the incredible ways that Christ is acting through him, he shouldn't get too confident, shouldn't become too boastful in his words. Jesus says to Paul that his strength, his power is made perfect in weakness. How about that? Power made perfect in weakness. And Paul seems to accept this idea of weakness, saying that he is becoming content with it. He says, when I am weak, then I am strong. I often struggle to accept my weaknesses, but Paul has discovered their great power. Because the truth is that when Paul or any of us embrace our weakness and trust in God and God's Son, we become a vehicle for something very transformative. When we accept weakness, we allow Christ to work through us, to be strong through us, and that becomes a powerful witness to those in our world. Now, if you're unsure whether Paul is really onto something here, our gospel actually demonstrates that he is spot on. Jesus, we hear, goes home to Nazareth. He encounters people who are unwilling to show weakness, unwilling to consider that from this man that they knew from years ago, from his childhood, they may have something to learn, to grow through his knowledge and his teaching. In the face of this, we hear Jesus wasn't able to perform hardly any mighty deeds. What? This is Jesus, the Son of God. How is it that the Son of God was not able to do anything? Well, Jesus doesn't force himself on them or on us. And his presence and power are visible often because people are open enough, we might say weak enough, to allow Jesus to act precisely through the parts of ourselves that we may not be particularly proud of. It all has me wondering, as a follower of Christ, am I weak enough? I remember during those days as an intern that it was the doctors who were humble enough to ask questions about the things that they didn't know that often ended up taking the best care of patients. And the doctors who let themselves really feel the emotion of the situation they were in, perhaps with tears or with laughter, giving whatever was needed, they were the ones who ended up providing a kind of healing that no medication was going to offer. Some might call them weak. And yet, that is exactly the kind of doctor that I would want for myself or for someone that I love. And I wonder if for you too, it's been through people who were open and vulnerable through whom you've been most inspired or transformed. For all of us who are growing in faith in Christ, we don't have to avoid weakness. In fact, we're called today to embrace it. When we do, something new can begin. Embracing weakness, I've learned, makes for some pretty incredible doctors. And it turns out it makes for some pretty great Christians too.